Welcome to another exciting installment of NR 693, the Masters of Natural Resource Stewardship Seminar. Today we have Jill Oropeza, who is a watershed program manager for the City of Fort Collins Utilities. And so one of our goals in this seminar is to get you exposed to different areas of natural resource management that you might not have considered or thought of before. And so Jill fills that really nicely. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about her work, her career path, what she does for the City of Fort Collins Utilities, and how natural resources impact our utilities.
Good job.
Take it away.
Awesome. All right, so today I'm going to talk about natural resource management, but primarily through the lens of collaboration. I'm going to talk about, just real quickly, what is the city's role in watershed management, and then also kind of some of the lessons I've learned in bringing science into policy and practice through working in the city. As a little background, I started out with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from the University of Kansas. Then in 2003, I started grad school here at CSU in the GDBE program, got my master's in ecology several years later. And then in 2007, I started working for the city as a watershed specialist. So in between that time, there's a particularly 4-year period that I was doing my master's and working, and I was a new parent. And so I was also working in a watershed program that's a long-term research site up in Rocky Mountain National Park. So that was kind of a logical sidestep into the city's capacity and need for a watershed program specialist. I started 2003 to about 2011 as the program specialist, and then we had some staff change over, and our big staff of 2 went down to a staff of 1. And I assumed the role of watershed program manager, and have been doing that since. We've since also built up our program again. I have a watershed technician who is also a CSU graduate, Jared Heath. He works with me as the watershed specialist. So it's a big team of 2, but there's a lot of work that we get done, and primarily that avenue of getting that work done is through collaboration. So just wanted to give you a little bit of the background, because I think that probably my background, I've spent some time with some federal agencies doing seasonal work here and there. I did some consulting over the years, and I think that my path is probably similar in some respects to maybe what you all will take or have already taken. So I first wanted to touch on natural resource management that goes on in the city, and there's a lot of different capacities that the city fills, and what the areas that they were doing natural resource management are primarily these 4 subheadings: stormwater, natural areas, parks and forestry, and then water utilities. For the most part, the majority of this resource management, whether it's floodplain management or recreation or corridor restoration on the river, those are going to happen on city-owned properties. And so they have city policies in place that direct those activities specifically for city-owned properties. I work over here under water utilities for the drinking water utility in source water monitoring and watershed protection. And those are the 2 areas that I'm going to focus on the most for this talk, because that's what I obviously know the most about, but also because we don't own or manage any of the land in the watershed, or either of our source watersheds. And so we come at resource management from a different perspective, and kind of a tactic or strategy to getting to watershed protection. Underpinning all the work that I do for the city in the watershed program is the city's drinking water quality policy. All of those sub areas that I just had up there on the screen, they all have their own policies that direct and basically define the scope of the work for each of those areas. And that's a really kind of important lesson for me when I went from studying ecology to looking at issues, really broad landscape level kinds of things, and then coming to work for an agency where my scope was very defined by a policy. And in some respects, you know, even within that, a mission that was built out of this. So the city protects our raw water sources from contamination or other activities that diminish that quality to our customers, and that would result also in increased treatment costs. So I went from a period of time working on issues that, you know, on nitrogen deposition and things like that that were, you know, either global or regional or local in scale, to something that was very, very specific. And that took a while to get used to, and how to navigate through bringing science to play through these kinds of policies. So a little bit about the program. The Watershed Program, here's our mission. It comes, you know, it's excerpted a little more succinctly from that drinking water policy. We monitor water quality for the protection of raw drinking water supplies. So I work for the drinking water utility, and I basically monitor all the sources that will eventually come into our water treatment facility, which is located on the west end of town on West LaPorte Avenue. And we bring in both of our main sources of water, which is Horsetooth Reservoir, which you can see here, the Poudre River, that's our other major supply. And so we bring those two sources in, and we treat those at our facility and send it out through the distribution system to all of our customers. And customers, I mean individual residents, businesses, etc. So there's a lot of things that go into that. This program was started in 2006, so it's a fairly, 2006, so it's a fairly new program, and I came into the program about a year after its inception. The source watersheds, this is a different view, and this in purple, what you see is the Colorado Big Thompson system, which brings water from the western slope of the Continental Divide over by Grand Lake, brings it through the Adams Tunnel and out. It daylights in Estes Park. That's where the water comes through a Trans-Mountain diversion. Daylights, it mixes in Lake Estes with Big Thompson River water, and then it's sent through a series of canals through the river. And eventually, this red dotted line, this is the Hanson Feeder Canal that feeds into Horsetooth Reservoir. So the water takes a long route depending on the primary source at a given time of year. If it's coming from the west slope or predominantly from the eastern slope. But it has a long way to travel between the Big Thompson and the Poudre River watershed. There's about 1,000 square miles of forested, primarily forested landscape. We do have Estes Park, Red Feather Lakes, some small communities, but for the most part, it's forested. It's owned and managed by land management agencies, federal Park Service, National Forest Service, State Forest Service. And so the point being is that you can see the amount of land that we're talking about trying to manage, and the fact that we don't have any active land ownership in these. Aside from the footprint of our facilities, we don't own any of the property. So it makes managing for the water supply a trickier situation. So that's why we rely so heavily on collaboration. There are 3 water treatment facilities that get their water from these 2 primary sources, Horsetooth and the Poudre, and those include the city of Greeley. Many folks don't know the city of Greeley gets their water. They take it out right around the cattle guards as you're going up the Poudre Canyon, and they deliver it by gravity all the way to Greeley, which is a pretty interesting feat. So, and the other one is the Tri-Districts. They have a water treatment facility right next door to ours. And what they do is they service the outlying areas outside of Fort Collins. So it would be LaPorte, some of the south of town towards Loveland, those sorts of areas. So that's just a depiction of the watershed.
I have a question.
Yeah, yeah.
While this screen's up there, so do you have strong opinions on NISP?
The question was, do I have strong opinions on NISP, which is the Northern Integrated Supply Project? And that's a water development project that's being proposed by Northern Water. And, you know, the city has taken a position on an official position of conditional opposition. And the team of people that were asked to approach that and evaluate the project, I was on that team, and what we did is we looked at it from a technical and scientific merit standpoint. So really we said, have they done the adequate analysis to ensure that all the concerns have been addressed, and there were some major concerns and analysis that we want to see prior to offering any sort of support for the project. So at this point in time we're asking that they go ahead and complete some additional analysis.
Is for the reservoir, would it show up on this map where it's going to be?
It would be,
You're seeing the reservoir?
it would be about right up here. It would start, yeah, so here's Park Creek. So yeah, I think it starts right in here. So this is Ted's Place as you're going up 287, and then you see it's that valley that is right up above there, right in the hog
another
box.
course that we're all in, and we all have projects.
Uh-huh.
And my group's project is to look at the public comments from NISP for the draft, for the EIS, and then the supplemental draft,
Mhm.
and kind of do an analysis on it.
It's a big task. There's a lot of...
We're focusing on 3 comment groups, and one of them is the City of Fort Collins.
Yeah. Well, if that's something that you would like to talk about more afterwards, I'd be happy to share with you what I can. So this is a different perspective for those who might not be familiar with the area that we're talking about. This is a map of Colorado zoomed in. This is the Big Thompson. The CBT project is what we refer to it as. It brings water from the northwest slope. And then here you see the darker brown. That is the main stem of the Cache La Poudre River watershed. This star up here, that is the water treatment facility, and then the North Fork of the Poudre River. And we include that in some of our discussions because we do own water in that basin, although we don't use it for drinking water. It's used for trades, for drought protection, that sort of thing. Part of our core function as a watershed program is to operate 2 primary water quality monitoring programs. One being on the Poudre River and the North Fork of the Poudre River, and then excuse me, Horsetooth Reservoir. We monitor those 2 sources directly. And we have monitored Horsetooth Reservoir for about 20 years. And this year was the first year that we entered into a cooperative agreement with Northern Water Conservancy District. And there was redundancy in our monitoring programs, and so as an efficiency, we work with them pretty closely on other water quality monitoring projects. They took over the monitoring side of that program. So we, at this point, report and analyze the data for issues relevant to water treatment, but they are doing the active monitoring. And then we participate in the Big Thompson Watershed Forum, and that's another monitoring program that covers the Big Thompson River watershed. We also do special studies. We look at the impacts of wildfires, floods, TNO. I have that sprinkled in here a few times. What that stands for is taste and odor. So there are problems that don't pose risk to drinking water customers, but they do present perception problems, and then there's also emerging contaminants, these things that we can now have the technology to detect, and we're trying to establish a baseline for some of those, and those would include like personal care products, herbicides, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, hormones, things like that. And we do have a website that we put all of our reports on. I know that you can't find this, you can't copy down that link, that URL fast enough. It's pretty long. But if you go to the utilities website and what we do water, you can find your way to the Source Watershed Program, and all of our reports and everything we do is listed on there.
Bill, I'm just curious, do you also monitor before it gets transported across the slope and placed into Horsetooth?
The question was, do we monitor prior to the water moving through the Adams Tunnel to the eastern slope? So western slope water sources. And the answer is no, we do not actively monitor that. We monitor on the east slope starting at the point where it daylights coming out. There are water quality monitoring programs in place, and Northern Water does most of the monitoring on that side of the divide.
So that would be Lake Estes where you guys do it? At the-
We don't, so the monitoring that happens is through the Big Thompson Watershed Program, and I believe the first place that we monitor is Lake Estes, and maybe above that at, there, I don't know what the name of it is, but it's where the water actually comes through. If you take, it's up by the YMCA. If you drive that road up, you can actually see where the water comes through, and there's a pond up there. So that's where we actually start the monitoring. And then there's also another upstream site on the Big Thompson within Rocky Mountain National Park. So those are kind of what are the two characteristics of the two sources of water before they blend in Lake Estes.